Hello, heathens, witches, Vikings, and pagans. My name is Yonai Ingolf, and I am your host. If you're a regular follower of my channel, welcome back. If you're new to my channel, welcome. We're happy to have you. If you explore my other videos, you'll notice that I speak rather frequently about what it means to be a modern-day Viking, and whether or not a Viking has a place in today's modern society. Well, for today's video, I felt it was important that we take a step back and actually define that word a little bit. Viking. What does it mean? What did it mean? What is its origins? And how do we apply it to today? This will be a fairly short video because the information is rather concise. So with that being said, let's jump right in. A more concise explanation of the possible origins of the word Viking can be found on Dr. Jackson Crawford's page. A link will be added in the description below. But for the purposes of this video, we're just going to focus on a couple of those words. The first one being the actual closest representation to the word Viking, which is the Old Norse equivalent, Viking. Now, the term Viking was actually a verb. It referred to the act of Viking. And that basically referred to any kind of seafaring raid. If you went out onto the high seas to raid another village or country or whatever, that is the term you would use to define the act. The second term that actually refers to the person who does the raiding, where most people say, I'm a Viking. Well, you would define yourself as Vikingur. Vikingur was actually a derogatory term. It had a very negative connotation. It was basically the Old Norse equivalent of pirate. The positive word that people wanted to be called, that a lot of people actually associate with the term Viking now, was actually Drangr. Drangr was the word that you would use to define a warrior, a battle-hardened, what we consider to be Vikings. A lot of people actually mistake the word Viking to mean an entire civilization, all of Scandinavia, when that simply was not the case. Not all ancient Scandinavians were Vikings. Only the seafaring raiders were. So, are they using the word wrong? I don't believe so. Its original intention, its original meaning, yes. But words have a tendency to change and adapt and evolve, and their meanings change just as much. For me personally, again, all of these videos are my personal opinion on my personal path. This is not meant to be taken as canon by the gods. This is just meant to be this lowly Viking's opinion on our way of life. But the term Viking nowadays, I would almost equate to the equivalent of the word knight. It's a way of life that we adhere to better ourselves, to better our communities, and to better our families. That's its meaning now. That is how we have adopted it. That's how we have adapted it. A similar example of how words evolve their meaning over time is another word associated with our religion. Heathen. I actually love this word. This one's my favorite. I love calling myself a heathen, referring to my religion as heathenry or heathenism. But its origins, much like the word Viking, are actually derogatory in nature. Heathen was essentially the Middle Ages equivalent of the word redneck. It referred to any country-dwelling person who lived in an underdeveloped part of land, very rural, very underdeveloped. That's really the only thing I can really think of is underdeveloped. And it was meant to be a derogatory slang. You know, oh, look at that heathen. You know, sort of like, look at that redneck over there. But much like the rednecks of today who have embraced that term to say, yeah, I'm a redneck and I'm proud of it, we heathens have adopted that as well. However, before we adopted it, its meaning changed all on its own. Heathen originally meant country dweller, but in more recent years, it was adapted to basically refer to anybody who had a religion that was not that of the Abrahamic God. Basically, anybody who did not adhere to Christianity, Judaism, or Islam. And anybody who did not follow the Judeo-Christian Islamic, or otherwise known as Abrahamic religion, was called a heathen. And that could have meant anybody. That could have meant Hindu, Buddhist, pagan, which pagan is a rather broad term, but we won't go into that in this video. But it was also meant to be derogatory in nature, because most of the people using that term heathen in that context were essentially Christians who were referring to heathens who were basically devil worshippers. We're not. At least not all of us. But more recently, we have embraced that term, heathen. We've made it our own. So in much the same way, we can actually embrace the term Viking and adapt it to today's standards as basically being a knight of the old Norse gods. At least that's my opinion. That's all for today's video. Tune in next week. And as always, Skål!